Hey, you big dumb idiot. Looks like you got yourself a saucy hand.
Yeah, I do.
Try yourself a Picasso boneless wing. Maybe next.
Well,
Outlet Liquor is your place to buy a case. Stock up and save when you shop the lowest prices available every day at Outlet Liquor. You never have to wait for a sale. The more you buy, the more you save. Only at Outlet Liquor.
What's your outlet?
Report the news. Yeah.
Folks, welcome into a playoff divisional round edition of the Crowd Assist podcast. I'm your host today, Kevin Masseri, with Mike Bunt. Going to bring you 30 great minutes of action here. The show's brought to you by Outlet Liquor and Picasso's Pizza. What's your outlet? We're here today to Mike. We're going to make it pretty simple. We've been on, we've had Matt Weston on earlier, kind of our QB guru, kind of our closeted Bills Mafia member, as well as just a really good Houston Texans guest who broke this game down unbiased. So we had him on Wednesday. Check that out Check that out earlier this week. We've been posting it. It's a great read there. Great watch as well. Mike, we're here with about, call it 4 hours roughly of game before game action. We have a great NFC game coming up. The underdogs have won so far, including the Cincinnati Bengals, being able to go on the road to either Buffalo or Kansas City next week. So that's a story. We had the San Francisco 49ers beating the Packers, and then we'll see what happens here in this Rams-Bucs game. But, Mike, we're going to start there. What have you thought so far of these lower-scoring defensive games? Let's hear it from you so far with the underdogs 2-0 on the road teams.
Yeah, this is playoff football. Low-scoring games, ugly, not what you would typically expect. But that's what happens when it's January and the temperatures drop and teams can't do all the things that they're accustomed to doing. I found both games kind of boring, to be honest with you. Neither were really entertaining to me, but loved the endings. And for the Bills, this is stacking up perfectly at this current moment. Obviously, you have to get past Kansas City, which is going to be a very, very difficult challenge tonight. But you look at it, Cincinnati pulling off the upset, you could have the AFC Championship in Buffalo with a chance to go to the Super Bowl. You can't draw it up any better than that. And I already saw an early line. If the Bills are to get past Kansas City, they'd be about 6.5-point favorites against the Bengals. So right now it's the rematch against the Chiefs, and I can't wait for tonight.
Yeah, it's crazy because betting odds, we talk about betting here a lot at Trainwreck Sports, plus 350 for the Bills and the Chiefs. They're the most favors to win the Super Bowl without even being in the championship game, AFC championship game yet. That leads you to believe two of at least the top three teams remaining, including what you do with the Bucs. If the Bucs get knocked off here shortly, the Bills and the Chiefs could be playing as the two best teams remaining in theory. So that's very interesting, Mike, that you might have the Rams, the 49ers, and the Bengals as the three remaining teams. If that's the case, you're playing the top five teams. 1 and 2 are the Bills and the Chiefs. So that's very interesting to say. Just that's what a really weird and lucky Titans team kind of did to the whole AFC, putting these two teams up definitely around early. And you can make the argument that they might just be the two best teams in general. So Vegas would agree with that. But there is a lot on the line tonight. And who more poised than the Bills? The Chiefs had a really great stretch of football. They kind of faltered down the stretch with that Bengal and Broncos games. That Broncos game they should have lost if it wasn't for a Melvin Gordon fumble against a pretty poor team late in that game. That would have further knocked them down to the 3. So this game would be in Buffalo had that fumble not had happened. But you can't play the what-if game. The Bills would have had to play the Steelers in the first round. You never really know what could happen in all those scenarios. You can't kind of play that. But the two best teams are at it tonight. No one's here to listen to us talk about the Bucs. No one's here to listen to us talk about the Bengals game. They're here to kind of listen to our thoughts on this game, Bills versus Chiefs. And I've kind of talked about it ad nauseum. You have the two best quarterbacks going up against each other. But the one thing the Bills have this season, Mike, I want to get your thoughts on this. The number one overall defense. They did not have that last year. And I was very adamant at the end of the AFC Championship game and saying that was not as good of a defense as I expect from Sean McDermott. That's kind of how I left. The offense may be a tick better last year, Maybe not at down the stretch. The running game's going. The Bills' weapons are better this year. That offensive line got going at the same time. So let's call it a push at this stage of the offenses. But you got to give the defense of 2021, 2022 a bump up, right, Mike? Because that defense last year really struggled in the playoffs in at times.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of people forget that they struggled as a unit last year. They were middle of the pack as a defense, and that's the one thing that really held them back from being a Super Bowl team. This year, number one defense, and then, honestly, listening to the media talk about them at times, you wouldn't even know it. This defense has been great all season long, outside of a few outliers against heavy running teams. You know what? The Chiefs aren't one of those teams that are going to pound the rock a ton. They want to get it done in their passing game, which kind of plays into the Bills' defense. Now, against Patrick Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, and Travis Kelce, you know you're going to give up yards regardless. So it's kind of more contain and prevent touchdowns and hold them to field goals than it is really holding them under 300 yards or anything like that, because that's almost impossible against Patrick Mahomes. But if the Bills defense can come to play and cause some issues for Mahomes at times and limit them, they have a really good chance at winning this game. Because you look at it last year, they just didn't have a chance. Josh Allen had to be superhuman with an injured Cole Beasley and a Stephon Diggs that wasn't 100%. If the defense can hold the Chiefs under 30, you're talking about Josh Allen getting the Bills to what they average on a game by game basis, and you could win the game.
Yeah, I mean, Mike, let's look at it. The number one overall defense, the best pass defense. They're the top of the line in a lot of categories. They're down defense and a lot of things that aren't fluky. You've played people like the Bucs. You've played people like the Patriots. You've played people across the board in different levels of talented. It's not just the Jets games. They've been statistically sound the entire season, Mike. So I need to get your opinion on that. Is the biggest difference right now with these games. And they showed it in week 5. I've said this exclusively on this show that this team is built to beat teams like the Bucs. They came up a little bit short. Built to beat teams like Kansas City and Green Bay and teams like that. They weren't necessarily built to beat the Colts and the Titans and maybe in the heavy running wins of the Patriots the first game. But guess what? They're all out. They're gone. Guess what's left? A pass-happy Bengals team. You got a potential couple passing teams here in the Rams and in the Bucs. You have the 49ers kind of as that outlier, but they're just kind of a mixed match of everything. They don't really have a quarterback. That's going to be an interesting. I don't think they get out of the NFC Championship game, but you have mainly passing teams. After all this talk about these running teams, the Bills built this team to win this game, and then they match up very well against the Bucs, who's basically a poor man's Chiefs team at this stage of their development. And this awful offensive line and a much worse defense.
Yeah, and this is why you build your team to be pass first and defensively guard against the passing attack, because passing is what wins in modern day football. You can say everything about the run game, and it does suck when you go up against a team like the Colts or the Patriots and they run for 200 plus and kind of take control of the game, possession battle, run the clock. But you know what? That is outlier football in 2020. Most often you go up against a team that can run the ball, you should still stay in the game, even if they pound it for 150, 200 yards. So we look at this Kansas City matchup, and a lot of people are discounting the game earlier in the year in which the Bills won by 18, because they're saying the Chiefs have changed since then. And yes, they have improved. They will have players back. You're going to have Chris Jones in the middle, and he gave fits to Feliciano last year. You're going to have some returners to the secondary. You're going to have a healthier team overall for the Chiefs. So there are some issues there. But overall, people are forgetting the Bills didn't win that game by a close margin. They were in control of that ball game. Going into the fourth quarter, they were owning the game. It felt pretty safe, even against a Mahomes-led offense, that the Bills were going to win. So I think we're discounting the fact of how well the Bills played at that point, even if Kansas City wasn't playing their best football. And what we're also discounting is when Kansas City wasn't playing well in the beginning of the year, it wasn't that they were losing to bad teams. They played the Tennessee Titans. They played the Buffalo Bills. They lost to the Chargers, and they lost to the Ravens, Chargers and Ravens, when they were actually playing good football. So as a whole, that tells me Kansas City has struggled against better football teams. And I think you can take some away from that. And we're also discounting the fact that the Bills have gotten better since that point. The Bills can run the ball. They have found their offensive line. And defensively, they've stayed consistent throughout the year. They're going to have Matt Milano back, who missed that game. That'll be huge going up against Travis Kelce. And really, the one disadvantage for the Bills, you don't have Tre'Davious White. But look at the defense since Tre'Davious White has gone down. They've continued to play well, and they find ways to scheme against opponents and still play at a high level. So I still think it's all there for the Bills to pull off the slight upset today at Arrowhead.
And you're forgetting the Bills adding Matt Milano back in the fold. They didn't have him week 5. It's a huge matchup advantage in the run and against Travis Kelce. So the Bills are able to mitigate some of that loss of Trey White that way. They won't have to. They had to do a couple special things to be sneaky against the tight ends and across the middle last time. AJ Klein, etc. Now they have AJ Klein as a third linebacker, special teams, so they grow a little bit there. But add Matt Milano back into the mix, arguably a top 3 defender. So you were missing maybe your second or third best defensive player. You're trading him for arguably your first or second best. So there is going to be a little bit of a drop off there, but I can't say how much that's going to be. The Bills have been stout in the front 7 lately, especially getting after the quarterback. 3 sacks last week, 9 against the Jets. Ed Oliver and Harrison Phillips have been as good as of a defensive tackle duo. I mean, the Bills got a couple of key position groups going at the right times. The O-line. Let's talk about the O-line, who has allowed 0 sacks of Josh Allen, as well as have ran for over 5 yards a carry under this new O-line. So there's a couple of differences there. The Bills didn't have that either in the first game. So we can sit here and say that Chris Jones is back. They benched Daniel Sorensen, was their big play. Still plays a ton of pass snaps. Still in for sub packages, etc. And for Juan Thornhill, who they like a lot at the safety position. But there are differences on the end. And then obviously you're talking about Rashad Fenton. We don't know. He didn't practice all week, one of their top cornerbacks. So we don't know what's going to happen there. Mike Hughes, his backup, is not as good as him. So there's instant benefit to the Bills there. And then we all know about L'Jarius Sneed and him getting hopped over, and he's been targeted a whole lot in the secondary. The Bills have some advantages there. It's not just they got Melvin Ingram, Chris Jones is back, and Daniel Sorensen's on the bench. Things are going to be different this time around. Well, the Bills can add in their piece with Matt Milano, their updated offensive line, and their defensive tackles, who are playing as good as any 2 defensive tackles in the league. Statistically, PFF, production, pressures, you name it. Defensive ends, for as much as they put in there, Mike, we'd like to see a touch more production, but even Addison's still been getting after it. Hughes still has productive moments. Greg Rousseau has been better down the stretch than he was there in the middle. Boogie's been getting after it a little bit. F.A. Obata has had his moments. So there is depth and talent there, hence why the Bills haven't needed to make an immediate defensive end move. That is why, they feel like they have enough strength there at that defensive end position, as well as the 2 defensive tackles that they really like. And that's including Starr can play in certain packages too now. So that's a pretty deep front 7. And then AJ Klein's coming off the bench in certain packages if needed. And you got a lot to like there in the front 7, the best safety duo in the league, and an average cornerback unit right now. But playing under one of the best and friendliest defensive back combination calls and mix-ups in the league under Sean McDermott and Leslie Frazier. So very friendly there to Taron Johnson and Levi Wallace, and Dane Jackson, who's been hit and miss. But the Bills are building depth for the future too. So Trey White comes back, probably going to sink a draft pick in the cornerback, and that's a great room too, Mike. So now all of a sudden, all this is coming together. The number 1 overall defense. I like my odds today with factoring in all that. This isn't going to be the number 32 ranked run defense like the Chiefs got to play with Jerick McKinnon last week. Darrell Williams is banged up too. Maybe not a huge deal with the emergence of Jerick McKinnon, but there is some things to look out for there. The Bills will take the Chiefs running the ball. That means they're winning in terms of how they perceive the Chiefs' weapons. Really, I've said this so much. The Chiefs have really 2 main weapons. And I am all for, if Byron Pringle is going to be the one to beat you, Demarcus Robinson, Mecole Hardman, okay. Like, you just can't, if that's how good they're going to be today, that's how good they're going to be. But you can't let Tyreek Hill beat you, and you cannot let Travis Kelce beat you. The Bills have some matchups that they like with their safety play and their linebacker play to take away some of those drags and beaters that they'll be running. Mike, all that being said on the Chiefs' offensive side, the Bills feel they match up pretty well. And then you turn the ball to the all-world offense at this moment, down the stretch. They've been playing really well. In 40-degree and sunny weather in Kansas City, this ain't what we've seen prior to that 0-degree cold weather game. Those were getting some awful weather, sideways rain, sideways snow for Josh Allen. And we saw how much it affected Aaron Rodgers. I kept hearing all season, like, Aaron Rodgers wins in this weather. Aaron Rodgers wins in this weather. Aaron Rodgers wins in this weather. What happened with weather yesterday? It was like the perfect storm for the Dome crowd. Aaron Rodgers did not win in that weather. You play in that 4 times a year, and you get some unlucky moments, period. You get some Isaiah McKenzie fumbles. You get some bad Josh Allen games, and you get that kind of atmosphere. 40 degrees and sunny. Yes, would love this to be in Buffalo. At least you're not going to get a game where Josh Allen couldn't be as effective as he would have been because of the rain and the snow. Like, it's snowing here today. So, Mike, all that being said, it does set up to be a really good best-on-best matchup. But it's time to kind of ravel into keys of the game, Mike. I want to know how you think the Buffalo Bills will win. If they win, how they will win, in your opinion, what they'll need to do. Is it establish the run game? Is it just dominate on offense? Is it dominate on defense? I'm curious to know how the Bills go to victory and how it would look if you got a high or low scoring game.
I don't know if I have one key or one thing the Bills need to do. I'm not really as much of an X and O person as you are, but my big thing is holding the Chiefs to 3. I like I said earlier, I think the Chiefs are going to be able to move the ball at times, but if you're going to win this game, you need to hold them to field goals at least 2 or 3 times in critical moments of the game. I expect this game to be played in the high 20s by both teams potentially, and you're not gonna. I don't want a shootout. I know fans they love the 37-35 games, stuff like that. I don't want Kansas City scoring 30 plus, because even though I have a ton of faith in Josh Allen, the Bills offense, sometimes they can be inconsistent. And I don't want this to come down to Chris Jones getting an interior pressure, forcing a fumble or a bad Josh Allen throw, and next thing you know, the Chiefs get a victory. I want the defense to make me comfortable throughout. And honestly, like I said, I expect both these offenses to do well, and hopefully the Bills are able to also continue to run the ball effectively, because I think that'll be important today to their success. One thing that we've seen with the Bills throughout the last year is when they can run the ball, they're unstoppable. I'm not saying the Bills need to run it often. I'm not saying I want to see Singletary get 100 yards, nothing like that. But be able to mix it in enough to where you keep the Chiefs off balance and you can get the ball to the weapons. I don't know how any team in the NFL at the current moment can stop the Bills if they're effectively running the ball and protecting Allen. There's too many weapons on this Bills offense. So run the ball, protect Allen. I know it's a lot easier said than done, and you'll have a chance. Otherwise, if we're seeing Chris Jones wreak havoc, we're seeing it come down to Allen needing to drop back 40 times. It could be a tough game, especially when you're trying to keep pace with Kansas City.
And that's true. It's been told by Kansas City analysts that Chris Jones makes some guesses in the run game. Like, he isn't the world's best run defender. So what does that mean? I've heard from analysts on the Bills end now to run at Chris Jones. That seems counterintuitive, but he will shoot gaps looking to get to the quarterback and looking to make big plays. But if he has the penetration up the field, guess what that leaves, Mike? It leaves a gap and puts a lot of pressure, on my opinion, on the average Kansas City Chiefs linebackers. You have Nick Bolton. You have Willie Gay, who shouldn't be allowed to play, but is based on the proceedings there after being let out of jail 2 days ago for domestic violence. I don't think any player should ever get to play until that's squared away. But he's able to play today. So just some of that stuff there at the linebacker position, to me, it's weak. It's a weak unit. I don't care what you say or how you try to slice it. That is a weak unit of the Kansas City Chiefs. You could even argue every unit on that team's better. I just do not like that linebacker unit. So you put a lot of pressure on them. You run at Chris Jones, and you might have some success early and often today with Devin Singletary. That is the key to success. You hit it on the head. If Josh Allen has to drop back 40-plus times, yes, he's the best player on the Bills, probably entire team, obviously. But I don't know what that means. Like, that could be good things or it could mean extremely bad things. We need complementary football today, and I think Brian Daboll wants to go out and show that he's one of the best offensive minds as he's nearing a potential New York Giants, Chicago Bears opportunity here in the future. So I think we'll see that on display here as he's putting in his final resume tips as like, hey, I'm the best candidate. I'm the best choice for an offense.
Yeah, same with Leslie Frazier. He has a interview opportunity right now too. If he can shut down Mahomes and this Chiefs offense, he might get himself
that's a job.
So
that's a job.
Honestly, I wouldn't mind if they're both gone after this year because that means that they probably did pretty well today, and we might be hosting our first Lombardi. So I would take the trade-off, get the Super Bowl, and lose both coordinators.
If they lose 40-0 today, I'm not saying neither of them will get a job, won't get a job, but it doesn't look great. Honestly, it's recency bias. Look at at some point there in December, we were ranking the playoff quarterbacks, and Josh Allen wasn't even on your top 5. Most of those quarterbacks are out except Burrow. So you had Rodgers as your number 1. You had obviously Patty Mahomes as number 2, but then you had Kyler Murray, and a bunch of these guys are out. And if Tom Brady loses, he could be out. It's recency bias, Mike, to your point. Like if they lose 40-0 today, they could still get a job, but it doesn't look great. It doesn't.
Abel probably gets a job either way right now. It's Leslie Frazier that has the more uphill battle if they allow 40 against Kansas City. And it's for reasons that aren't even really his fault or fair when you think about it. Obviously, his age is a factor. And then you have the unfortunate situation where a lot of executives and general managers just don't hire black head coaches. And that's not his fault. I mean, he has the number 1 ranked defense in the NFL and points a game and yards allowed per game was a previous head coach has done as good as any coordinator in the league. But unfortunately, the way hiring works in this league, those are 2 things that would be difficult for him to overcome if the Bills had a horrible defensive showing late in the postseason.
And they're making changes to the league and to entice, better interviews and promotions. 2 third-round picks going to the team that actually helps him get a job. The Bills have always been great about it. I mean, Sean McDermott basically says he's absolutely worthy, and I love that kind of stuff. So, and I've been on shows where I've answered the question, I'd prefer Leslie Frazier in a similar model to how Sean McDermott started the Bills. I like that model to have a heavy, good defensive coach mind, bring in a young up-and-coming offensive coordinator, and do the same model that the Bills are able to do. It doesn't need to just be find Sean McVay. So I think that's my play for Leslie Frazier, and I think that he's a really good defensive mind. I think he's a good leader of men. I think he makes a good defensive coordinator here and a good head coach, and I think he has the opportunity today to put a cherry on top, hire me. So I don't fully look at it like, hey, got your coordinators interviewing for jobs. They only care about the job, that potential head coaching job. You got to look at it like this is a resume item. Like you have a chance here to put on your final resume, took out Patrick Mahomes and took over the AFC. I think that is a worthy bullet point to show that you have, and we saw it last weekend. It was last year where I was wondering if the Bills were going through the motions, which was interesting because of how good they were in the regular season. And then this year's is kind of different. They played really well toward the end, struggled at times in the middle of the season, and looked to be ticking on all cylinders in January rather than in November, December like last year. Even though they did make it to the AFC Championship game on talent alone. I think this team has a lot to show for it this season. They put it together last week.
The comparable is when the Chiefs won their first Super Bowl with Mahomes.
That's what people are saying, yeah.
The year before, they went to the AFC Championship, the young quarterback having an amazing season going up against Brady, and they got outmatched before somehow getting it back to overtime. And, I mean, you give Brady the ball first in overtime, it's game over. Next year, went through their lumps, battled through it, and they ended up winning. And what a team I actually think could be modeled for kind of the Bills is what Cincinnati was this year. They're like the Bills of last year or the year before, where they get hot, they start finding themselves, and they don't know any better. They just go into the playoffs. They're not playing pretty football, but they're finding ways to squeak out wins. So I think what you're seeing with the Bills right now is they're confident. They've been there. This is their 3rd time in the playoffs under Josh Allen, the 4th time in 5 years under Sean McDermott. This is not unfamiliar territory. It's now we know how to prepare. We know we're talented enough. Let's go out there, execute, leave our best on the field.
That's right, Mike. Now it's time for score predictions. We've heard it from Matt, who picked the Bills earlier this week on the pregame show. We said we were going to hold off on our predictions, but it's time. It's toward the end of the show. We're about to have kickoff in the NFC game here in a couple of minutes, so we only have about 3 minutes left on the show, Mike. I need to get your prediction. You got to put it in stone. You got to put it on the show. We kind of all talked about reasons why. We kind of talked about that. The Bills have already tried to change the rules with hiring head coaches, etc. Nothing happened from it. So you got to answer, is this going to be a good thing for the coordinators to be looking at jobs here? Bad thing? And then give me your score prediction. Everyone needs to know, like, we need, Bills Mafia is probably tuning in mainly for this end of the show here.
I don't think it's a good or a bad thing that the coordinators are interviewing. I think they're focused on the job at hand and also trying to look out for their futures. I think they can do both at the same time. So I have no issue with that either way. I know Brandon Beane, I think, has a culture where they want their talent, their coaches, their players to be successful. And if their coordinators move on, good for them. We have guys that can come in and then replace them and then hopefully continue to do a good job. I am not happy with my score prediction right now. I have this fear of the Kansas City Chiefs. I've never been able to really get over it over the past few years since they got Patrick Mahomes. They're just such an unstoppable offense when they're clicking that sometimes I don't believe you can stop them even if you do have the perfect defense. So for that reason, at home, their recent play of success in the last 2 years, I think the Chiefs are going to find a way to get it done. I'll say 31-24. I know the over-under, I think, is 55. I'll say under, even though I have it right on the dot. But I'll go like 31-24 Kansas City at this point.
I mean, that's fine. And it's a one-score game, and the Bills are 0-5 in one-score game. So that is a fair decision. The Bills haven't lost in more than an 8-point game. So to predict more than 8 would be wrong. But I think where Mike is right there is the 0-5. Patrick Mahomes at home. He doesn't lose at home. Now it runs through Kansas City. A lot of people are saying it runs through Buffalo. It doesn't until the Bills win. Then it runs through Buffalo. But right now, it does run through Kansas City as the 2 seed. You lost to Jacksonville. You do not have it running through Buffalo at this minute. You can take that over here in a few hours, though, to kind of change that narrative. But Mike has history kind of repeating itself, losing last year and then being 0-5 in one-score games. You turn to my opinion, and I'm going to look at statistics too, and I'm going to say this Bills team is running on all cylinders, literally running on all cylinders. Their defense came together at the right time. Their offensive line came together at the right time. And we've brought it up. This looks a lot like the 2019 Kansas City Chiefs to me. And the ability to continue to play. They're going to need to get rid of that mantra of not winning on the road. As I tweeted out, and everyone further stole my tweet using exact dates of the Bills not winning since the Miami game on the road, over 29 years ago. So for me, that's a big thing. And I think the Bills are getting rid of all their streaks currently. That is one that they can finally take down and get to an AFC championship game to take down the final streak, which is the Super Bowl drought. So I think the Bills are going to get it done. And I've said this on other shows. I have it a 36-24 Buffalo win today. It's that 12-point margin that the Bills have won all 12 of their games by. So Mike's using the 0-5 in one-score games, and there is data to show that could rear its head in today. I'm using data to show they win every game by 12-plus points, and I have another 12-point win because I think the defense of the Bills is probably one of the best units left in this bracket. I just truly believe that the number one overall defense at some point shows its head. And Mike, you said you like the under, you like maybe a lower scoring game. What is it proving today so far in the divisional round? That defense has reigned by San Francisco. Defense, even in Green Bay, defense has reigned at times in that Cincinnati game and pretty much the entire game. Cincinnati, Tennessee, the defense showed up. These sack numbers are getting out of hand, breaking records on the defensive side. So who needs to show up?
There's reason to be encouraged. This is one of those things I continuously battle myself. What does my head say? What does my bias as a fan say? So this is, and you know me. We talk about UB and Ohio and how with UB, I'm a fan of UB, but I'm able to be objective. Sometimes with Ohio, I let my bias come in, and it's kind of the same thing with the Bills, but the reverse. My head says these teams are even. On a neutral field, it could go either way, 50-50 out of 100 times.
The Bills would be favored on a neutral field.
My head also sees the DVOA numbers, the ESPN Football Power Index numbers, and those say that the Bills are either the best or the second best team in the NFL. My head also sees that the Bills already beat the Chiefs this year by 18. So everything my head looks at objectively says the Bills have a great chance at winning this game. And if all things being even, they probably do at least half the time. It's my fear of a repeat of last year, a repeat of the annihilation we saw in the AFC Championship, and the Patrick Mahomes factor. I know him and Allen on paper are almost identical. I know the Bills average basically the same amount of points as Kansas City, and the Bills have a better defense. It's the fear of the Bills have not been to that Super Bowl since the Kelly years. And until they do it, I can't really predict it. Obviously, next week that I'm going to be thinking differently. But until they prove that they can knock out the Chiefs when it matters, this is kind of like the Colts-Patriots dynamic to me, where Peyton Manning was a great quarterback, but only a few times ever did he ever knock off Tom Brady. So hopefully the Bills-Chiefs never get to that point, but this is big. I need to see it before I can start predicting it down the line.
And Mike's getting booed everywhere by Bills Nation, by Bills Mafia. But you know what? There's some valid takes in there. I just kind of see as them being way more even and the Bills being better this year. And DVOA numbers on the long haul don't generally lie. And the fact that at one point they were one of the best DVOA teams ever. In some stretches, the defense was playing some of the best football ever. And they have the number two overall offense and defense. That's wavered from 1 to 3 pretty much all season, and on both of those categories. Offense dropped just a tick after some of those mid games, lulls against, the Jaguars and et cetera. But they learned a lot in those games. They found a better offensive line. Like, Mike, if it was one of those situations to where they were coming off of one of those Jags games last week and barely won on a field goal, I would tell you, a lot of more of your fears probably are going to creep up against this good team. And some of those warts showed up in the playoffs last year. In the Colts game, they almost lost.
It's also hard to repeat great efforts in back-to-back weeks. The Bills were stellar last week against the New England.
So was KC, though.
KC was too. And you know what? Being objective about KC, they did struggle early on against Pittsburgh. They didn't look good moving the ball in the first and second quarter until after TJ Watt got that touchdown. They looked poor against Denver. That was a surprisingly bad effort against the Broncos. And outside of their games against the Raiders, who couldn't stop a nosebleed, they really didn't have a lot of dominant performances down the stretch of the year against teams that were better than Raiders, Steelers caliber, that mid-tier. So there are a lot of reasons to be optimistic. And if this game was in Buffalo, I might be picking the Bills. What I will say is and I've told you this in private conversations, I do think these are the two best teams in the NFL at this moment. And I do think the winner of this game is going to win the Super Bowl. So it's not like I don't think the Bills are good. It's just right now I still think Kansas City is their kryptonite. And until I get proven otherwise, then they win today. I'm ready to start planning a parade downtown. But
yeah, plus 350, Mike. Vegas agrees with you that these are the two best teams left, and neither of them ever even in the championship game yet. So Vegas totally agrees with you more than one way. So especially if the Bucs go down here as kickoff is approaching there, it's pretty likely that one of these teams are definitely the favorite. But we've seen some upsets so far here in this playoffs. So I agree with you, Mike. I think that they need to get this off their chest, and winning twice against KC in KC, that might finally be enough to say, nah,
changes the narrative, changes everything.
This might not only be even, but it's starting to lap to the Bills.
If the Bills win this and they go on to win the Super Bowl, suddenly that Mahomes is here, Allen here, suddenly looks pretty even going forward. They both have a Super Bowl with their name. How do you differentiate them? You got to start giving Allen the love that you give Patrick.
And I think Allen is chapped of being called the fourth best AFC quarterback behind behind Herbert, behind Lamar Jackson, obviously behind Mahomes is okay. But he doesn't feel like, he feels like he's 1A, 1B. Like he does not feel like he's
Burrow probably feels the same way with Herbert. You got these 5 great quarterbacks in the AFC right now. And, two of the 3 Pro Bowl quarterbacks, their teams didn't even make the playoffs in the AFC. So what does that tell you? It doesn't mean anything. And
it doesn't, but it means something to these guys.
No, that's the big thing. It doesn't mean anything from a professional level. It doesn't mean that you're any better, but you can use that as a emotional and motivational booster. If Josh Allen can use that to his advantage, good for him.
Yeah, and lastly, Mike, they do matter. This stuff's in their contract. As dumb as the Pro Bowl is, they get paid on it. Like stupid things like 100 catches. That means nothing. Like that you get 99 or 101. Does that
I mean, look at Poyer. He didn't make the Pro Bowl, but he's a first-team All-Pro. How does that make sense?
So
the All-Pro means more than the Pro Bowl.
But Pro Bowl to them is something in their contract, and it's something that others, fans, coaches, players vote on. So it is interesting to have the respect of your peers. Josh Allen showed last week that it was ridiculous, and he's going to show this week that it's further ridiculous. And I think that all plays into it too, Mike. So, but that's going to do it from the Crowd Assist podcast. We gave you 37 minutes of prime time action. Mike, give us some final notes.
I'm just pumped for today. I hope it's a magical night for Bills fans. The thought of having an AFC championship game right here in Buffalo, it's something I never dreamed of growing up during the middle of a 17-year playoff drought. So let's just hope for the best. And God, if it happens, if they can pull this off, I think we might be seeing a championship parade in Buffalo in February, which it'll be cold, but we'll be ready for.
That's fair, Mike. Well, from the Crowd Assist podcast, that wraps us up for today. We'll hopefully be back at you with a pregame next week with some great Cincinnati guests, but we'll see what happens here over the next 6 or 7 hours between the NFC game and this game. From Picasso's Pizza and Outlet Liquors, Kevin Nasseri, Mike Bunt, get out there, enjoy your best Picasso's Pizza for the game today. Good night now.